Welcome to The Debate, where we engage in a respectful intellectual exchange to illuminate complex issues drawn from substantive material. Today, our focus is the 77th Emmy Awards, and specifically a really controversial element they introduced, this charity donation tied to the length of acceptance speeches.
Right, the one where they deducted, what was it, $1,000 for every second over 45 seconds?
Exactly. A novel approach led by the first-time host, Nate Bargatze. And it sparks a huge amount of discussion about its impact. So the central question for us today is really this. To what extent should award ceremonies like the Emmys prioritize these kinds of novel approaches to audience engagement and broadcast efficiency, like the money countdown, versus preserving the traditional celebratory experience for the winners and, crucially, the actual gravitas of the awards themselves? My argument today is that modernizing the broadcast for a contemporary audience is, frankly, absolutely essential for the Emmys' continued relevance.
See, I come at it from a slightly different angle. While I understand the intention, right, the desire to streamline the Emmys, I find the money countdown was just a major distraction. It ultimately risks overshadowing the winning speeches and, honestly, diminishing the significance of the awards. For many winners, this is, truly a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Subjecting them to a plummeting amount of cash, shown right there on screen throughout the evening, it just created this rushed, almost anxious feel. There was very little room for winners to relax and offer spontaneous, authentic remarks.
Well, some speeches can drag on.
Sure, but we even saw veteran speakers like John Oliver explicitly tell the host, F you, jokingly maybe, but still for the pressure. And Tina Fey felt she had to apologize for a lengthy presenter bit. Gimmicks like that, in my view, they actively dampen enthusiasm, and they might actually prevent those genuinely memorable, maybe even over-the-top speeches that go viral organically. Think Adrian Brody's Oscar speech. You don't want to rush those off stage. And then the whole false threat at the end where CBS just donated the full amount anyway, it kind of exposed the artifice, didn't it? It suggests the integrity of the winner's moments was maybe unfairly compromised just for a temporary ratings boost. I really believe authenticity, whether it's political messages or nostalgic reunions, that resonates far more deeply with audiences than manufactured tension.
I absolutely see why you think that. And the reaction from some winners certainly highlights the tension it created. However, my perspective is that the 77th Emmys experimental approach, particularly that money countdown, was actually a necessary and I'd say earnest attempt to modernize the broadcast, to enhance audience engagement. Look, live award shows consistently struggle with pacing, right? And lengthy, sometimes frankly self-indulgent speakers can lead to audience cringe. This Mr. Beast-esque pressure timer, like those high-stakes YouTube challenge videos, it infused the Emmys with a unique dramatic tension. And actually, many viewers saw it as a good joke, a valid way to keep the show running on schedule. We live in an era where, let's face it, many viewers are watching the Emmys while they're watching in bite-sized clips scattered through their social media timelines. So prioritizing a tighter, more dynamic show that caters directly to contemporary consumption habits. It's about maintaining relevance for a broader digitally native audience. And the host's commitment, I think, was clear. He was regularly updating viewers on the money, and he personally pledged $250,000 to make sure the Boys and Girls Club of America still received the full $100,000. So this wasn't just a cheap gimmick. It felt more like a strategic move to adapt the broadcast for how people actually watch TV now.
Okay, that's a compelling argument for modern relevance, I grant you that. But have you considered the actual effectiveness of this money countdown in practice, beyond its stated intent? While you call it an earnest attempt to keep the show on schedule, wasn't it also a major distraction? I mean, it seemed to make speakers who were probably already nervous even more so. It risked overshadowing what they actually had to say. That screen showing the plummeting cash, it created an undeniable rushed feel. It stifled any genuine spontaneity. We just mentioned John Oliver's direct, albeit humorous, rebuke and Tina Fey apologizing for presenter banter. These weren't isolated incidents, right? This wasn't just about preventing self-indulgent speakers. It felt like imposing an artificial constraint that directly impacted the celebratory nature of the event. And the charity element, however well-intentioned, added this undue pressure to what should be a moment of pure recognition. If the goal is truly audience engagement, do you really think people are tuning in for a high-stakes timer, or are they tuning in for the human moments, the triumph, the vulnerability?
I'm not convinced that the primary impact was solely negative, though. I'd argue its objective was multifaceted. Yes, manage a live broadcast effectively and create buzz. The tension created by that ticking clock, as many viewers noted, was seen as a good joke by some, and it provided that dramatic tension. It's a proactive measure against those lengthy, sometimes dull speeches that make audiences cringe and ultimately tune out. We have to acknowledge the reality of modern viewership. We're in what people call the attention economy, right? Where every second of our focus is fiercely competed for by endless content streams. In that environment, a ticking clock isn't just a timer, it's a hook. It keeps people engaged, even if it's with a bit of, maybe, playful anxiety, and it generates social media chatter during the broadcast. So while you point to stifled spontaneity, I see a deliberate attempt to engineer those very bite-sized viral moments for social media, creating a collective, interactive experience, something that generates buzz during and after the show, giving the Emmys a cultural footprint that, perhaps, a traditional, more staged show simply can't achieve anymore. Do you genuinely believe that in today's media landscape, where attention spans are, well, measured in seconds, a purely traditional approach to live broadcasts is even sustainable?
I understand the drive for efficiency and, yes, for digital buzz. But if we're prioritizing engineered virality, aren't we risking the long-term emotional resonance and the fundamental integrity of the awards themselves? Those genuinely chaotic, unscripted moments, like you mentioned Adrian Brody's unscripted kiss at the Oscars, or even Hannah Einbinder's impassioned political statement at this Emmys, they created deeper, more lasting impact precisely because they weren't forced into some predefined game show format. They earned their virality through authenticity. This forced brevity, it undermined the chance for those truly impactful moments. Hannah Einbinder, for instance, delivered a powerful message, right? And then she felt compelled to promise to pay back her share to the charity because of the timer. That's not organic engagement, that's pressure. And it kind of overshadows the message itself. What audiences truly care about, I think, are those raw, unscripted human moments, whether it's an impassioned political statement or a nostalgic reunion, like when the Gilmore Girls cast reunited on that Stars Hollow-inspired set and joked about their show's past. Those are the moments that really resonate, that make people talk, not a forced game show timer. Does a temporary ratings bump from a gimmick truly outweigh the risk of alienating the award recipients and devaluing the very recognition the Emmys are supposed to celebrate?
That's an interesting point about the, let's say, quality of virality, though I might frame the host's role a bit differently. Beyond the charity aspect, Nate Bargatze's unique, kind of understated comedic style as a first-time host was, I think, crucial to how this whole experiment landed. He presented this controversial element with a sort of dry wit that maybe made it feel less like a heavy-handed rule and more like an ironic commentary on award shows themselves. He leaned into the absurdity, didn't he? Turning what could have been just a dry timing rule into a running gag. For many viewers, that self-awareness and his performance really resonated, offering a fresh perspective on the typically formal role of an awards host. And his personal commitment, backing it up with his own $250,000 donation to ensure the charity received its full $100,000, that really underscored that he wasn't just deploying a cheap trick.
Genuine attempt to innovate while supporting a good cause. It made the countdown perhaps more palatable as a joke for at least a segment of the audience, don't you think?
I'm sorry, but I just don't entirely buy that it was all about positive impact, or that his dry wit fully mitigated the pressure. While Bargatze is, yes, undeniably talented, his regular updates on how the money counter had plummeted well below zero only seemed to emphasize the divisive nature of this game I made up, as he put it. To me, it felt less like a genuine charitable endeavor and more like a high-stakes, self-imposed game show, which, for many, put hosts and presenters like Tina Fey in a really awkward, stressed position. When a host is constantly pointing to the dwindling cash, even with a comedic delivery, it inevitably shifts the focus from the winner's achievement to their speed.
It places the host in a role that, for some, felt less like a celebratory facilitator and more like a game show enforcer. And the eventual reveal that it was a false threat, that CBS donated the full amount anyway and Bargatze added more, actually, that makes the whole exercise feel less substantial in retrospect, almost like a cheap trick was played on the winners themselves. It makes one wonder if the awards themselves, given the Television Academy's strict rules, were taken as seriously by the producers as they perhaps should have been. And for a first-time host, was this really the best way to define the broadcast tone?
I see why you feel that way, I do. But I think we also need to consider the broader impact here. A more engaging, more efficient show, well, it ultimately benefits the Emmys' public perception and relevance in what is a fiercely competitive media landscape. In a world with countless entertainment options, the Emmys need to evolve to attract and retain viewers who might otherwise just tune out completely. This kind of innovation, even if it's imperfect, even if it sparks debate like this, demonstrates the show's vitality, its willingness to adapt, the perception of the Emmys as a relevant cultural event, one that audiences actually care about. It depends on its ability to hold attention. A tighter, more dynamic show feels like a crucial step in that direction, ensuring the Emmys remain part of the cultural conversation, not just the individual awards, but the entire broadcast experience. Because if the shows aren't engaging, if the speakers are dull, then do audiences really care about the awards or the winners anymore? That's the underlying question, perhaps.
That's an interesting point about relevance, framed that way. Though I would argue that devaluing the winner's moment through a gimmick like a timer fundamentally compromises the gravitas of the Emmy itself. The Emmys is supposed to be a significant award from the Television Academy, with strict rules and procedures outlining its integrity, its importance. The focus really should be on the achievement, not the clock, especially when we look at the reactions to the actual winners and how perceived snubs impact whether audiences care. For example, some might question the value of the awards when highly anticipated music specials from artists like Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter or Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, both huge cultural moments, Grammy winners, lose out to an SNL 50th anniversary special. Now, SNL is an institution, of course, but these perceived snubs can make audiences question the criteria. And ultimately, whether they care about the Emmy selections when the spectacle of the broadcast seems to take precedent over honoring potentially groundbreaking work. The dignity of the winner's acceptance and the integrity of the Television Academy's recognition, that shouldn't be negotiable for a rating stunt. It risks undermining the very meaning of the award, and that feels like a dangerous path for long-term relevance.
What an intriguing discussion we've had today. Really pulling apart the complex tightrope the 77th Emmy Awards attempted to walk. We've explored how the money countdown, while clearly intended to engage a modern audience and streamline speeches, sparked this genuine debate over whether it added, dramatic tension or ultimately just overshadowed the winner's momentous occasions.
Exactly. And whether that focus on bite-sized content for social media truly aligns with the traditional grandeur of an awards ceremony, that remains a fundamental point of divergence, I think. There are compelling arguments on both sides, highlighting both the necessity, perhaps, of evolving formats for audience retention and the absolute importance of preserving the unscripted, human element of live recognition and the true meaning of the awards themselves.
Right. Ultimately, the question of how award ceremonies should adapt to changing media consumption habits while at the same time upholding their intrinsic value, well, it's one that continues to invite thoughtful consideration and further exploration within the broader media landscape.